Hi all, welcome to another video. Now this is the smallest desktop PC case I've ever used for a build. It's an Antec 110. So straight into it, looking at the front, and you can see the size from my hand resting on the case. So it's got USB 2 ports, microphone and headphone ports. There's a power switch, and moving round the side, that's the main vent to control any heat given out by this system, which shouldn't be a lot because there's only the CPU, and there's also a vent on the top as well. Looking round the back, got all the motherboard connections, which, as there's no graphics card on this system, we will be using those graphic output ports, and that's completely covered on the other side. Now the plan is to test the system as it is and then upgrade that CPU, which I'll talk about later on. So I'll get this side panel off so you can see the inside of this case. It's also got a removable stand on the bottom as well, but otherwise you can probably rest it like that on its side. Power to this system is from an external power brick, so you really are restricted to what CPUs you can fit in this should you wish to upgrade. Something like an i7, I think, unless it's the one with the S suffix, it's probably not advisable to attempt to fit that. So I'll get this side panel off, you can see the inside. So looking inside the case, as you can see, there's not really that much room to work with. The one problem I did have is when I was fitting the motherboard, I couldn't actually get it in the case without removing the front USB panel connections which intrude into the case. So I took those out. I mean, there's plenty of ports on the back anyway. Now I was pushed for time because with past builds using this case, I've managed to get the motherboard in there without removing those USB front connections. So I think with a little more time and effort I could have got the board in there. So on this side are the components for the case's power supply, and that's all the cables from the case. Two SATA connections here, there's the RAM sticks there, and obviously the CPU cooler there. Now again, with past builds in this case, I've managed to fit an Arctic cooler, but for this build I've used the standard Intel one, which is more than adequate. So looking around the back, this is where you connect any hard drives. Now for this build it's got 2 SSD drives, but you can actually fit a 2.5-inch laptop drive if needed, but I always advise have a small SSD for Windows and boot in, and then if you haven't got a spare SSD drive, use, as I say, the laptop drive, and they're held in place by this removable enclosure here. So what I'll do is I'll start up this machine and run a few benchmarks. Before I run any benchmarks, I thought I'd give you a brief overview of the system. So it's got an Intel G3260 CPU, which is ideal for home office, not really gaming, but we'll see what it can do in a minute. Now in the BIOS you can allocate a value to the integrated graphics video RAM, and I've allocated the maximum, which is 1 gig. It's got 2 sticks of 8 gig RAM. Now that's 1600 megahertz RAM, but this CPU will only support 1.333 megahertz speed, so the system's running at that. It's got 2 SSD drives. Now the plan upgrade is to a quad-core i5 4590S CPU, and that will run the RAM in the 600 megahertz speed. But what we're going to do for now is run the system as it is and see what it can do. So I'll just start off with a couple of benchmarks. Okay, so I've finished running the two graphical benchmarks, Heaven and Valley. Now both cases I set the resolution to the maximum, which is 1920 by 1080, and everything else like quality to low and anti-aliasing, switch that off. And with Valley we're getting a score of 390, and with Heaven getting a score of 333, so nothing to write home about, which is what we expected. So what I'll do now is start up a few games and see what the results are, and I'll talk through the performance with each game as well. Up first is Counter-Strike Global Offensive, CSGO. We're getting mid-40s with all the quality settings set to the minimum, and same for the resolution. As long as you get above 30, 25, 30, that's fine on this system. Now for some reason I can't get the frame rate counter from Steam to record, so if you can't see it at the moment inside, it's mid to upper 40s, which is just fine really. So just get firefight going. Yep, so that's Counter-Strike Global Offensive. On to Paladins. Now this does surprise me actually, because this game's quite good and there's a lot of characters on the screen, but at the moment we're nudging nearly 60 frames per second, so there's a lot of leeway in this game. So maybe nudge up the quality a touch, or maybe the resolution, whichever works best for you. But at the moment this system's got no problem playing Paladins. On to Realm Royale now, and mid 40s, 50s frames per second, not too bad. I'll try and get a firefight going. I think the same engine is used on this as it is with Paladins, with similar sort of performance, which is just fine. I'll try and get a firefight going. So we're getting 40s, and that's 40 frames per second, that's fine. So again, as with Paladins, you've got a bit of leeway, maybe up the quality a bit, or resolution, whatever you're pleased with. But yeah, even touching late 40 frames per second, which on a system like this is just great. So that's Realm Royale. On to Team Fortress 2. Now, no surprising that the performance is not too bad with this game. It's less taxing on system, but I have got a lot of the quality settings set to max or high, and it's getting mid 40s, so I'll just go out. So it could be better, I suppose, so maybe adjust those accordingly. It's on maximum resolution as well, with a lot going on. It's mid 30s, but ideally on this game you want a little bit more than that, so get those settings down. That's Team Fortress 2. Back to Team Fortress 2, because I wasn't happy with those graphical settings, so I've nudged a lot down to medium or low, and we're getting a more respectable mid 40s, late 30s, so it's worth doing. Don't forget Bandicam is taking up some resource. Right, so that's Team Fortress 2. Zula. Now I've taken the defaults, which the resolution is the highest and the quality settings are set to medium, and getting a few characters moving on the screen. It's mid to late 30s, which is fine. Not much leeway there, so if you really want more frames, then maybe get the resolution down and the quality. But yeah, Zula is okay on this system. On to Crysis, and with the resolution set not to the lowest, but one of the lowest, and all the quality settings set to low. Just get a few characters. We're getting mid to high 30s, which on a monitor this size is just fine. Just get a few more characters moving on the screen. So yeah, it's touching above 40 as well, which is okay. So that's Crysis. Now you can be sure this system will play Far Cry and Far Cry 2 without too much problems if you adjust the settings accordingly, but Far Cry 3 on 1920 by 1080 and all the quality set to low with not much going on, it's just not playable, unfortunately. So what I might do is stop the video and just see if I can get this frame rate up a touch. So I've put the resolution on 800 by 600 and it's getting a bit more respectable, late 20s, and I think without Bandicam recording you probably get above 30. But don't forget there's not much character interaction at the moment, so we'll imagine that frame rate will go down a lot, or a few frames per second at the very least. So if you want to try this game on this system, please bear that in mind. But if we're exploring, then it's probably not too bad. Just do a bit of driving. What is worth doing is looking online for any config file changes. A lot of these games have text files containing various configuration settings, and they may advise how to get more performance out the game by changing the config file rather than what appears to be quite limited menu settings. Right, so that's Far Cry 3.